Each of you had a terrifying childhood. Now, some people edit their childhood so severely that in retrospect it doesn't seem terrifying. Some even make so bold as to say they had a wonderful childhood. Those people are intentionally blinding themselves. It is the purpose of childhood to experience. It is the business, the work of the child to receive, to be, for better and for worse, programmed. You enter into this earthly paradise alone, afraid, helpless, born into fear, born into violence. Your first waking experience is to be struck below the belt, and there is a repetition of that below-the-belt action for the rest of the childhood. Childhood, though it has been romanticized, particularly in recent times, as being a time of delight and of magic, and assuredly there are those times when one is awakening that one is delighted by the experience of awakening, delighted by a dawn that is fresh in your mind and in your eye, delighted by a beautiful summer afternoon of endless freedom. Yet those high points are not the rule but the exception. The fact of the matter is that you are helpless, you are completely dependent upon semi-friendly and sometimes unfriendly giants to give you food and to keep you clean, to carry you from place to place. They are all that stand between you and the unthinkable. Utter dependence. Now, when you consider that in your real form you are completely free and fully whole, to enter into such enslavement is a trauma, because you have of necessity forgotten who you are in reality and why you're here. You know only the mindless terror of the helpless in the grip of fate. Now, we seem to be painting rather a dismal picture of childhood. A childhood that Charlie Brown and his cohorts wouldn't recognize, that Mr. Disney would not have memorialized. But it is the childhood of the heart. It is the childhood of experience. It is only in relatively recent years, over the last 100 years or so, that childhood has been romanticized into being such a time of innocent joy and pleasure. In fact, children have been persecuted and abused throughout human history on earth. In a time that is labor-intensive, the value of a human being is determined upon the contribution that can be made to the family or to the society. And children, perforce, can make no such contribution until they are old enough to walk and to carry and to fetch. But throughout most of human history, as soon as a child was old enough to labor, the child did labor. And the pleasures of childhood were brief and transitory indeed. Childhood has been institutionalized as a time of terror, as a time of experiencing total loss of control, where you must recognize very clearly that you are not in charge of yourself, that your fate is not in your hands, that you have no control over this moment or the next. This deep-seated fear conditioning lasts through the life. Now, you come into this life with a varying set of programs, matters that you need to deal with, fear issues that you need to encounter, challenges that need to be met, individualized, each of you here for a somewhat different reason, a somewhat different purpose. But all of you by and large, experiencing the same fundamental conditions, and yet having triggers in that childhood life that differ one from the other. Well, the chief triggers, fear triggers, that is, are the parents. And depending on the nature of your issue and your own sex, it may be the mother, it may be the father, it may be a combination of the two, secondarily aided and abetted by siblings, by friends, and by strangers. You are consistently and persistently victimized according to your own plan. The fear that was latent in you, that you brought with you into this incarnation, that is to say, the karma, the issues that needed to be dealt with, are triggered. They come to life in your life. They create blockages for you that must be dealt with during the course of the life. What we want to emphasize here is that childhood is the keystone for all that follows in your earthly incarnation. So much of your own childhood is buried, safely buried by the ego self in its attempt to protect you from knowledge and circumstances over which you have no control, that the darkest of closets has been prepared, filled, and locked, loaded with experiences that you couldn't deal with as a child, and that in this time, in your lives of change, of transformation, of the ending of fear and the beginning of love, that you must open those closets, release those fears, see them for the boogeymen that they are. In your state of helplessness, all things are magnified. And the fears that you locked away were much bigger at the time you locked them away than they would look to you now. But as long as they are locked in the dark in the back of your mind, they have the power to terrify you and to force detours on your path that is unchanged by the passing years. Very well, this is your situation as it has been the situation of the dual human being over these past many centuries. Dual, half in darkness, half in the light, half divine, half earthly, half blessed, and half cursed. You have been exploring the land of fear in life after life. In each life there has been some discovery, some growth, some illumination. In many lives there has been very little that you would look at and say this was positive, because most lives are experiential. You are patterned, programmed in childhood to deal with certain kinds of fears, and you don't deal with them. You allow them to happen to you, and you repeat error, and you repeat error, and you repeat error until it is ingrained in you. Vicious circles. And you end the life as blind and as terrified as you began it, except that you have accumulated the experience of the exploration of the dark, the experience of terror. Even in lives that have been lives of tremendous spiritual advancement, because they have been lives out of balance, that spiritual advancement was sometimes helped along by and always marked by either physical, mental, or emotional trauma, pain, disadvantage, abuse, so that the spiritual attainment was gained at great cost, and pain was still the theme of the life. Now you are come into a life in which you may end your duality, in which you may accept the mantle of freedom, the promise of the Christ, love, forgiveness, and wholeness, ending the duality forever. In this life and in all incarnations to come. New tasks lie before the human race, a human race that is at last in balance, its three primary elements united, body, mind, spirit, a triunity that allows the human being to at last be fully human, to use all of the abilities that are a part of one who was indeed created in the image of God. The darkness, the fear, the sin, seen to be illusion that had strength only because you gave strength to the darkness, only because you believed in the darkness' power to harm you. In this life, those of you who are here to graduate, to be a part of this generational evolutionary leap that changes the face of humanity forever, you have voluntarily agreed to face your fears, to deal with your fears, to recognize their hollow, illusory quality, then to withdraw your belief from them and see them dissipate and accept your own wholeness. It is a difficult path, a painful path. The pain of the death of the fear-ridden self. Fears that you have clung to as though they were security blankets because it was the reality you knew. You have known only pain, with a few brief glimpses of joy quickly stifled lest bad luck fall upon you. And now you accept wholeness. Well, you're paying with your own blood as that part of you that you have recognized as yourself dies, and at the same time you are reborn into that self that was only potential at birth, wholeness, looking at yourself through new eyes and not at first recognizing what you see, seeing the debris of your old fears as you continue to sweep it out and allow room to be filled with the joy that is your heritage upon receiving the energy of the Christ that is flooding into you now. Your path is difficult. It is a path now that is promising the joy that has always been the birthright of the human being and always been spurned. And as your life continues to unfold, the focus will be more and more upon the joy, upon the sheer joy of flexing muscles you never knew you had, of realizing that no disaster, no challenge, no fear is too great for your strength. Suddenly, that which has been most fearsome to you begins to look possible. Your consciousness, your understanding has been expanded and is continuing to expand, so you see things in a new light. You allow first a drop and then a trickle and then a flood of joy to enter you, displacing the fear that is going down the drain, and you are changing. Changing in ways that you do not understand, coming into a wholeness that you have never even been able to imagine as the phoenix is reborn, as you rise from your own ashes, and as you begin to consciously fulfill your purpose unhampered by crippling fear. That is your story. That has been your journey. The pain of childhood has been a verity throughout human history because of the necessity of creating the webwork of fear that you needed to explore in each life. Now, the purpose in dealing with children all through history, the goal has been for the parent to recreate an image of himself, of herself. Secondly, to create a being that would fit comfortably into the general society. And so the programming, conscious and unconscious, has been a programming of continuity, by and large. The vast bulk of human beings are programmed to be like the parents, and like the grandparents, and like the society, because every parent wants their child to grow up healthy and wealthy and accepted, loved, a part of the group, wants to see his own best characteristics in the child, and when he sees his own dark characteristics, beats the hell out of the child. And that's the way it's been, generation under generation under generation. But the rules have changed. There has been a foreshadowing of the energy of Mary and the energy of Christ that have come into the world now over the past decades. The beginnings of an awakening regarding the nature of human beings and the nature of child rearing. Your responsibilities as this new age dawns are as great as they have ever been for any parents throughout history. But the rules have changed, because you are giving birth and you are nurturing children of the new age. Children who are already in their potential whole, who are not here to deal with the duality of fear, love that you have been dealing with, lo, these millennia. Does it mean that these children are being born into your lives with little halos over their heads, perfectly balanced, perfectly behaved, not a problem in the world? Well, those of you who have young children already know that's a foul lie. No, that is not the case. But because circumstances have changed, you must now take into consideration what is the purpose that lies before my child today. It is different. Just as we spoke a few weeks ago about encountering one who fulfills the characteristics of soulmate, and that when you encounter this soulmate, there is often a recoil, a difficulty inherent in the relationship. You can feel the heart tug, you can feel the recognition, but you can also see that there's a lot that has to be dealt with before you can live happily ever after. So it is that the soulmate situation is a situation of potentials. You have all the qualifications, but you must come together to create your own and each other's wholeness so that you can each stand free and join together voluntarily in an equal relationship. For the child born now into the energy of Christ, born a few years ago into the energy of Mary, for every child born to one who is consciously on the path to wholeness, it doesn't have to be the same language, the same vocabulary that Plautus uses, that you may respond to, but it is nevertheless a fundamental understanding that you are going through the death and the rebirth process into wholeness, whatever the language. When this circumstance takes place, every one of those parents gives birth only to children who are in their potential whole, who are children of the new age, the creators of the future. Now, that's always been true to an extent. The children are the creators of the future, but this is a new future, and new children, and a new story to be told, and a new mission to be accomplished. It is not the goal that you have had. It is not the goals that your parents have had. It is not material success. It is not popularity. It is not even spiritual attainment. It is different than it has been because you're dealing with wholeness, with light, with love. But you are dealing with it in this age, in this time, with children who are born with that potential. If you can imagine a pie divided into 3 parts. Now, they are not equal-sized parts. For you and for the generations before you, there is a big part called body, and there is a big part called mind, and there is a little pastel, barely visible part called spirit. Because you don't know anything about it, it doesn't seem to have any practical use, its only existence is theoretical, and you may want to explore it, but you're going to be out of favor with most of your fellows who think you're nuts. And so you are existing perennially in a state of imbalance. The child is born with each of the pie slices equal, but to be filled. Being born into a world in transition. Being born into a world that is full of fear. The child whose playmates may well be lost in the fear that is the hallmark of the duality, the fear that is expanding in the polarization that presages and is the foreshadowing of the wholeness, who is going to be dealing with schools that are created in the image of the past, hierarchical, dual, authoritarian, that have none of the characteristics that are the basic stuff of the child's nature. Now, a child is never born a blank slate because you come into this world with an agenda. The children of the New Age are no different. They are coming in with work to do. It's not the work you did. It's not the work your parents did. It's not the work of exploring their own fear and trying to conquer it. It is the work of realizing their wholeness, building upon it, magnifying it, and using it. We've said before that the rest of this lifespan for each of you, now that you are in your fundamentals whole, is proving to yourself that you are whole and learning to use the tools that are provided to you as the spirit comes into equality with the rest of your being. Spirit born into the children of the New Age is already equal, is already balanced, but can be disused, can be misused. That part that is spirit can be ignored. It can shrivel. It can exist like an empty room in a house, taking up space but having no function. The body can, that part of the being that is body can yet be abused, can yet be broken, can yet feel pain. That part that is mind, ego, emotion can still suffer, can still be twisted. As this New Age continues and generation follows generation, and there is an accretion of knowledge and understanding, as the wholeness grows more real and the psychic spiritual connection among human beings grows more substantial, this will cease to be And the generations will grow naturally and fully into their wholeness and do their real work, which is to be a nation, a world of priests, of healers, of guides, of teachers, reaching out into the universe, moving inward into the many dimensions of reality that are a part of this house of many mansions. But in the meantime, your work is cut out for you as parents. Those of you who have children that are a few years older very likely have children that are very similar to yourselves in that they are here to graduate. They are here to be part of the evolution. And what we say in regard to the children of the new age that are born into wholeness applies pretty much to those older children also. And again, you cannot apply, as generations of parents have, the lessons of experience. You can't raise the child as you were raised, which you're unlikely to do anyway. You can't raise the child according to any past notion or ideal. What must be done then? How should these children be dealt with? You will be using your own enhanced awareness to help you to escape old patterns and to help you to see, to sense, to understand, and perhaps hazily at first, but to be aware of what's right and what's wrong, what works and what doesn't, what's appropriate and what isn't. It is again the voice of the higher self, the voice of the Spirit, that will guide you in this work. Now, we're talking about rules having changed. Well, one of the rules that's changed is that there aren't any rules. Because you must deal with each child as you yourself have always wished that you had been dealt with, as a unique individual with a very particular set of needs. And you must be assured that you are capable of sensing and ministering to those needs, else the child would not be with you. As the child has the potential for full wholeness, so do you have the potential to be one hell of a parent. It is a part of your work, and a very, very important part. To begin with, recognize that you are dealing with a spirit, a being, who is in every way your equal. Not your superior, despite being born into wholeness, but your equal. You are not dealing with an ignorant savage who needs to be civilized. You are not dealing with a sinful child of the old era that needs to be punished. You are not dealing with one who has no mind and must be led. Your task is more subtle than it has ever been as a parent. To begin with, what is wholeness? Wholeness is freedom. Freedom implies taking full responsibility for your life. Now, when you have an infant in your arms, you're not going to dress it warmly and put it out in front and say, well, go seek your fortune. Because you still have the obligation, the duty, the responsibility, and the joy of bringing this child up to a point where the child is able to make its way in the world. That's no different than it has been, but the means are considerably different. The child is you now, but without the pain. You are not in the child's life to trigger fears. A brand new role for a parent. You are not here to make mistakes, to screw up, to vent your anger. You're not here to be a fear trigger. Your child will have a temper. Your child will be willful. Your child is less likely to be selfish than past generations because of the nature of the whole spirit, but nevertheless very subject to the influences of the wider world, of the environment. Not some magical monster that you must approach warily. As we say, not some halo-wearing angel that you must bow to. There must still be guidance, there must still be firmness, there must still be some direction. But you are tending a garden. And the weeds that invade from this polarized society must be attended to so that the flowers can blossom. The child needs to have opportunity to express a nature that is mature. Your child is not going to grow up to be an axe murderer. Your child is not going to grow up to be a soldier. Your child is not going to grow up to live and die in misery. Your child is going to grow up to be an exemplar and a founder of a new race of human beings. Your child is exceptionally creative. The creative energy is not being blocked by fears, by the sense of guilt with which you were born, that was a part of the luggage that you brought into each life with you. You can twist that child and batter that child and abuse that child, and society can attack the child and twist the child and abuse the child. But you're not going to. This is what must be understood. Otherwise, you're going to be wringing your hands and screwing up your forehead trying to figure out what on earth is the right thing to do. And you'll be consulting Dr. Spock or some future Dr. Spock with anxiety. And you're going to be calling your relatives saying, what on earth should I do? What is the right way? The right way is in your heart. In opening to the Spirit, in becoming whole in the Spirit, you are different than you were. You are totally different from your parents, totally different from human beings in the past, in that you can trust yourself, trust your actions, know that you will act out of love and not fear. Know that you will create a flower and not a weed. Invest the strength of your belief in that knowledge, that you are, as your heart fills, as you grow more and more aware of your own wholeness, that you're not who you were and you're not going to screw this up. And you don't have to figure it out. Be sensitive, be aware. And you will always know the answer. It is not a burden and an enormous responsibility. It is finally the joy that every parent wants parenthood to be. And in this age of transition, you're still going to be dealing with a lot. But be comforted and be calmed and be encouraged by the fact that this child is made to be whole, to be strong, to be free. And everything that you do to underline and encourage that freedom and responsibility. Now that is why, it's easy to confuse sometimes what Plautus says with what you know as permissiveness. And it's not that. That's an abandonment of responsibility. That's saying, go out and be free and good luck to you. This is a balance. This is the guidance that you offer out of love, not because mom and dad did it that way, not because you wish the children would shut up and leave you alone and so you enforce rules of silence and obedience, but because you are the gardener that is tending a flower of great beauty, and you are being rewarded daily as that flower grows and shows its color and its beauty. Your choices always must come from the heart. Your choices always must have to do with, does this provide my child the maximum freedom with the guidance that allows choice to be made when there is relatively little experience in the life on which to make that choice. It is not hands-off. It is deeply involved, but wherever it is possible, allow the child to choose. Limit the choices so that the child does not have to choose from an incredible array of possibilities, but always let there be a choice. No dictates. No, because I say so. The child won't accept that. And remember that. You're dealing with different kinds of children here, too, whose wisdom is not blocked by fear, who are born into a state that you have struggled and bled to arrive at. Lucky devils. But not the case, because there's a multiplicity of dimensions of reality, and each spirit goes through every experience that is necessary for growth and for reaching this wholeness. And they have done so. They've done their suffering and their bleeding. And they have come to you because they are the flower and you are the gardener for them. No accidents. You are exactly what they need to become and realize their full wholeness. They are exactly what you need to express your high purpose clearly, to learn as the gardener learns about the nature of the garden he tends. Freedom. To allow freedom is to trust. You have been learning in these months and years of your experience on this path that you have had a deep and abiding distrust of yourself. That whatever other distrusts there have been, the bottom line is you don't trust you. And there's been many good reasons, as you look through this life and through past lives, to question your judgment. Because you have so often chosen wrongly. You have so often chosen for the wrong reasons. And it has been very painful for you to gradually learn to trust yourself, to make choices with the underlying knowledge that you can't make a wrong choice when it's based on your higher knowledge, when it's based on your intuition and not what you've been told, not the way you've been programmed, not through the rationality, but through the pure understanding of the heart, the spirit. In guiding these children who have come to you for this guidance, allow the freedom, show the path, encourage choice. The question of discipline still arises. You're dealing in a society in transition. You're dealing with a society going mad with fear. who are doing everything and anything they can to block the fear, to hide from the fear, to fail to acknowledge the fear, who are involved in drugs, who are involved in various hatreds and animosities that build their own false sense of themselves at the expense of others, who are in constant competition. You know, competition has been called the American way and the natural human state. It's no such thing. Competition is an expression of the duality. You are one. How do you compete with yourself? You are here to share and to cooperate, to form a network and a webwork among yourselves, to show that there is no hierarchy in the land of the spirit, to prove your own equality and the equality of all others. And so your children must be treated with this in mind: equality, responsibility, discipline that is truly loving discipline, that shows, that takes the trouble, that takes the time to explain. You're dealing with children who will understand an explanation, but will not understand point-blank orders without explanation. The army method of running a family is dead. Take time. You yourselves are under increasing pressures, and they're not likely to alleviate, though your strength to deal with them will grow. It is a time of extreme stress. You're under pressure economically, under pressure in your relationships, under pressure in virtually every area of your life. But because of your own growth, because of your own wholeness, you are able now to bring balance, to bring peace, to bring harmony in the midst of dissonance, in the midst of disaster. You are learning the skills of meditation. Well, now, meditation, we've said this before, is not going to be a permanent part of the human experience. Meditation is a way of uniting higher self with outer self, with ego self. It is a bridge. As you grow more secure in your wholeness and more aware of it, the meditative state of mind becomes your state of mind. It doesn't mean you go around with your eyes closed and talk slowly and have visions. It means that the meditative consciousness, which is an expansion of your awareness, becomes a part of your waking daily consciousness. It's your birthright. It's the consciousness of a whole being. And it's a lot more that you have going for you in that consciousness than those who are here to be a part of the swelling clamor of fear. That in the foreseeable immediate future are going to still be the majority in this crumbling society that you have to deal with and that your child has to deal with. But because you have this extra awareness, you're not going to be reacting with the haste, the anger, the irritation, the impatience that has been a characteristic of human interaction. You will not be so distracted. When you live half in the dark and half in the light, you don't know what's going on half the time. When the light fills you and your consciousness grows, you see from a higher angle, a higher perspective, and the child comes up to you and says, "Daddy, Daddy," or "Mommy, Mommy, how do you do this? Tell me this." And they're going to be more curious than every generation that went before. How does this work? Enough to drive you nuts, but it won't. It won't. Because you will hear the Spirit. We've said before that part of this growth, part of this coming into wholeness and awareness of yourself as being ultimately one being, is that psychic spiritual links are formed among each of you on this path. That psychic spiritual link is already formed with the child when it is born, and only grows in its intimacy and in its mutual understanding. You're not going to have runaways, juvenile delinquents, burnt-out cases. Not in your family. Because you're so wonderful? Yes. And because the child is so wonderful. And the world is becoming so wonderful. What a Pollyanna. But it's true, you know, behind the crash of crumbling institutions, behind the apparent disasters and the pain that fills the headlines and the telecasts, is a structure of joy that is being built day by day in your own life and in the lives of humanity and in Earth itself, that is and shall be a source of wonder and of joy. It is up to you to change your focus, to choose the reality that you wish to endow with the strength of your belief. As you nurture your child, as you guide your child, as you teach your child, what happens when you come up against the demands of this passing age? When the child comes home and says, so-and-so said this, is that true? My teacher said this, is that true? But tell him the truth. Don't bow to the teacher's superior authority. Don't worry about his getting along with his peer group. Don't worry about the attitudes of the parents of his friends when they hear what a crackpot you are. Have the courage of your understanding and tell the truth in your belief that you know the truth. That truth makes him free, her free, and you free. And it is just the lingering self-doubts of the self that is passing that says, well, what makes me so special? How can I know the truth? Everyone, every generation, every parent thinks they know. My parents thought they knew the truth. Look, well, they screwed up with me. But you do know the truth. Not chapter and verse so you could sit and write it down. But because by allowing your heart, your spirit, to come into equality with the rest of your being, you have access to real knowledge. The truth, not the disguise. You've had to live amid disguise and lies in all of these lives, because that was the rule. You had to believe the lie that you were weak. You had to believe the lie that you have no control. You had to believe lie after lie about yourself so that you could experience that weakness, that lack of control, so that that frustration over generation and lifetime would build and build, and finally you would break through as you are breaking through now. But your child doesn't have to do that. Not in this life. And you have gained from the fruits of your experience. Trust yourself to be the perfect guide for your child. That's why the child is with you, because you are the perfect guide. Because that child's specific, particular, and unique needs fit hand in glove with what you have to offer. So offer it with confidence. Does it mean you're going to be right every time? No. No. This isn't heaven. This is still earth. While you may not be dealing the rest of your life with duality, you're still going to be dealing with a being that is half divine and half human, and still trying to discover what the two of them together make. It is still a time of exploration and discovery and expansion. It's still a time when you're being partly claimed by old responses. But you know what? Every time you are wrong, you'll know it. And you'll go to the child. And you'll either, if the child is very small, simply change the wrong that you have committed, or you will simply say to the child, I was wrong about that. I've thought it over and felt about, explored my feelings about it, and I blew it. You're dealing with equals. You don't have to worry about your status. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be some unassailable God. You're all gods. Be humble with your child as you are with your friend. Be truthful with your child as you are with your friend. For your child is your friend, is in fact a part of you that is equal with the other parts of you. And for a time, you have a job with that child of guidance, of discipline, but always love. Because you are a creature of love, and you can only express yourself in love. Does that mean that the day won't come when you have had a really tough day and you yell at the child and you whack the child? Will that never happen now? No, it'll still happen time to time. The difference is you don't have to justify your own fear. When you slip, admit it. Be honest. Be loving. I'm sorry. I am really sorry. I blew it. That has been so hard for parents to say to their children because they believed lies about what a parent should be, about the gulf that exists, because they believed implicitly in a hierarchy. Because they needed someone below them, weaker, less worthy, less whole, that they could kick as they were being kicked by someone above them. That's gone. That's gone. Your children are going to attain remarkable things. Each and every one of them. They're not going to be limited as children have been, as all human beings have been. They have potential that can be developed to the fullest or not, but they are not here to trip themselves up. Makes all the difference in the world. You provide the tools, you provide the guidance, you provide the space, you give them responsibility. Give them responsibility. You know, it's terrible to be a child, to be so small when your spirit is so great. To be so helpless when your spirit is so strong. To be limited this way and that. No, you're too young to do that. You're too small to do that. Children should be seen and not heard. Limitation after limitation. How terribly frustrating. No wonder you have hidden so much of it from your own view. It was so awful to go through. And now you're dealing with children that are really whole, and yet society wants to treat them as though they were fifth-class citizens. And it's up to you to counterbalance that effect. And it's easy. It is so easy. It is such a load off your backs. Do you know how hard, and many of you do know how hard it is to have to consider yourself to be a role model, to always be right, to always be seen to be strong, to fake your way through your life with your children, never burdening them with the knowledge of what's really going on? Well, the children mustn't know. Don't let the kids hear. You're just going to be opening your life to your children. And they're not going to be at all terrified by the ups and downs, the vicissitudes that are a part of every human life. They're going to be very grateful, though they know it not, to be included Not to be left outside listening at the door, wondering what's going on and how it will affect them. It's very easy once you realize it's easy. It's not a burden. Responsibility and burden are two different words and two different concepts, and it's time you stopped confusing them. You are each of you accepting full responsibility along with your freedom. And it isn't a burden, it is a joy. It is a release. You don't need to play games anymore. You don't need to let somebody else make your decisions for you, so you have someone to blame if it goes wrong. You find it so much easier than you ever thought it would be to be responsible for your own life. And in dealing with your children, to help them to be responsible for their own lives. You deal with what the parent has to deal with when the children are small and when they need someone else to earn a buck and buy the meals and buy the clothes and so forth. You give the guidance that has come to you in your awareness on this path. And most of all, you trust yourself and your psychic spiritual connection with that child to know that you're going to respond in a way that is right, and when you don't, you'll correct it. Then you can let go of the onerous burden weighing you down of parenthood and have a wonderful time growing together with these equal spirits and sharing in the delight of potential fully realized, and being full of joy that your children don't have to go through the hell that you did. You are building tomorrow, and you are not building it on the structure of yesterday. You are truly creators of the new. In taking responsibility for yourself, in attaining your wholeness, you are letting go of buck passing. You are letting go of inheriting everything, of doing something because it was always done that way, of saying something because it was always said that way, of thinking something because mom and dad thought that way. You are creating a reality intentionally, not accidentally, out of love, not out of fear, out of your sense of power, not out of your sense of helplessness, out of enlightenment and not out of darkness. Because you're not doing it with your mind. Your mind is helpful, but that's not where the knowledge comes from. The knowledge comes from spirit. And when the whole thing is put together, it works smoothly. And body, mind, and spirit together are 1,000 times more efficient than the imbalance of body and mind lugging around this inert spirit. To put all the burden of decisions, all the burden of life on the mind causes neurosis, psychosis, breakdowns, the triumph of fear. The mind isn't up to it. It's not the mind's job. It's been trying to do the spirit's job because you didn't know any better. Trying to decide things that it was no way built to decide because it doesn't have the facts. It sees along a narrow band. It sees quite well in that narrow band, but when it tries to deal with here and here, it is a nation of blind men being led by a blind man. So you don't have to put all that burden on the mind, and your child doesn't have to put all that burden on the mind. You open your spirit and you connect, and you don't have to figure it all out. You'll still teach him how to tie his shoes and tell time. The schools will still teach him how to read, add and subtract. But the real business of living, the real business of being a human being is the guidance of the spirit. And your own spirit, as it attains its wholeness and flexes its muscles and awakens and looks around, will do the same for that child. Now, we're going to cut short the lecture part of this because we know there are going to be specific questions dealing with your children as you're raising them now and with the prospect of raising children in a society that is still largely dualist, in a society that is breaking down, in a reality that is dying. Well, it's not easy. So we'll give you some time to think about that, and we'll come back for questions in a few minutes.
Plautus, is it still just as important for children to graduate from high school, even though the teaching system and the methods may go against their grain?
Again, there's really no hard and fast rule here. What we want to say as I suppose, a general rule of thumb is that cannot be the highest priority, because there are many who are finding a different path. You know, again, it's flying in the face of the common wisdom that, well, you're not going to get anywhere without a high school diploma, you're not going to get anywhere without a college degree, and so forth and so on. Well, that system is dying. The efficacy of its rewards are suspect. The world that is dawning and the world that is crumbling are combining to create changing conditions. For some, and probably for the majority at this time, the completion of the high school experience and perhaps on to college can fit very nicely into their life plan. But it is not to be regarded as the Holy of Holies. There is trust that must be expressed in the child. Again, you cannot take a dictatorial stance in this. You cannot say, well, my experience tells me that if you don't do this, you're in trouble. Open to your own inner knowledge and find the peace in your choice there. But listen to the child. Recognize, give the child the honor of the recognition that he or she is taking responsibility for their life. And you should make that clear. That this isn't my choice, you see. By the time a child is at the age where they're deciding whether or not they're going to finish high school, there are a great many decisions they're perfectly capable of. You may think, well, they're making this decision for all the wrong reasons. And if that is the case, and it's not, we're not saying that every child is going to make every decision correctly, even in their own eyes, as time moves on, but that they need to have the freedom and the responsibility to make their choices. Those choices can be rescinded, they can be changed, they can be altered as time goes by, but they need to have the responsibility to make the choice when all is said and done. Yes?
Thank you.
I find, because of all the pain I went through in my own childhood, myself sometimes trying to instill that pain in my children, but at the same time when I'm doing it, the other part of me is saying, and I'm assuming that this is because of my duality. But what I'm wondering is if somehow my children are protected from that pain that I'm experiencing.
Well, protected isn't perhaps the right word, because protected is a term that implies there is someone taking care of you, standing guard and so forth. Not to say there isn't protection, but we want to avoid that word because we're dealing so much with the issue of personal responsibility and freedom. The child came into your life knowing what was coming. In the wider reality, there is a vision that transcends time. The child is joined with you for all of the lessons that there are to be learned, even those that assume a negative appearance. Because you are growing into your awareness of wholeness, you are not expected should not be expected by yourself, and are not expected by the child to be infallible. Parental infallibility is a serious mistake since it's based upon falsehood. those times when you feel, upon retrospective thought and feeling, well, I've made a mistake there, then deal with that. Don't be concerned that that mistake has caused some a terrible and lasting trauma in the child. The mistake is a part of the growth, and the acceptance that a mistake has been made, and out of love the effort to alter those circumstances, is a lesson in itself that is important for the child to learn. So when the still small voice of your heart says, that wasn't according to your highest standards and your highest understanding, so then make a change. Don't just stubbornly say, well, I don't care, I did it and that's that.
Plautus, this is maybe a little bit more oblique, excepting it has to do with the child and me. And like you say, from where we've come, I'm in a situation right now with a woman named Penny at work that's a manager, and I had not suspected this before until just the last couple of days. But I do believe that I'm being catapulted or being pressured by this woman to experience the kinds of social abuse in a way that I experienced as a child that made me feel that I was incompetent or unable, being demanded of, not appreciated, fault finding, all that sort of thing.
Yes.
Is this true, and is it a time for me just to see my power in a situation
yes.
in which I was weak?
Yes, this sort of negative reinforcement is a carryover from childhood, and it is coming into vision now, because here you are, a completely different person than you were, and yet not clear in your own heart and in your own mind, in your own vision, that you are a completely different person. So here comes the test. Here's an old trigger. Now, how are you going to respond to this trigger? Now, are you going to respond as you did in the past, saying, yes, I am incompetent, how right she is? Are you going to respond in anger and say, I'm not going to take that sort of thing, I had enough of that, and fight it? Or are you going to recognize that this no longer applies to you, if it ever did, that you will not be fooled by one who seeks to cast a shadow over your light, that you are strong and firm and full of belief in yourself, and therefore can transcend this challenge to your identity, not be demeaned by it, limited by it, insulted or humiliated by it, but to, and we don't say stuff it, we don't say rise above it, we say act without fear, not in anger. Look at the situation, feel the situation, and act according to the inspiration of your own higher self as to whether you take in this information, releasing it because you know it does not apply to you, continue your own process of proving your competence to the only person that counts, and that's yourself. Decide that the circumstances of this work are not comfortable, encouraging, nurturing for you, and commence to make changes. What we are saying is, don't respond in anger and rejection, because that is simply the other side of the coin of the old response. You don't need to reject it any more than you need to accept it. It doesn't apply. That's the lesson. It doesn't apply. Now, she may be able to quote chapter and verse to you on how it does apply. But you know that you are not who you have been. While there may be characteristics lingering as the fear shrivels and falls away, you are focused on what is being born, not what is passing away. So it's a test of your own self-awareness. And your response should be based upon your image of yourself as a good, flowering, maturing spirit who is entering into wholeness and is perfectly capable in the responsibility that you have taken for changing circumstances that are not nurturing to you. You don't need to become emotionally involved in this. Yes.
Plautus? In listening to you, I'm just kind of revisiting my own feelings about wanting to be a mother, and yet I'm almost 39 years old. I think a lot of us have waited until later to even having children.
Yes.
Do I still have time?
Certainly.
And is it really in my path to do this?
Well, now we're not going to answer to your satisfaction, because we're not going to either close a door or say this is the door you must walk through. Mm-hmm. We will say that there is that potential, that this question of age is largely your acceptance of what you have been told. The creation of the child is a cooperative venture between you and the male and the child. It has nothing to do with anyone else. If there is a spirit that you wish to contract with, and who wishes to contract with you, circumstances will be such that that spirit will be born into you and out of you, whole and healthy. You are not as you have been. You are not and cannot judge yourself by the standards of other people who are not a part of this growth. You will hear that, it gets dangerous after a certain age. You're liable to have a child with this defect or that defect, and if you take that in and if you believe it, then you'll create it. And you'll say, oh, I shouldn't have waited. Now look what's happened. I've got to deal with this. But you don't have to do that, you see. You are in charge of your reality. And when you are acting according to the movements of your higher self, and you are responding to your own intuition, and you feel this is the time, then you should go ahead without fear, but with the joy that such a prospect should bring.
Plautus? It's obviously, I think if a lot of us had our druthers, we would rather be the children of New Age people rather than the positions we're in.
It's a better deal, no question.
Right. No, and there aren't that many people on the earth that are in the position and the lives we've had and the difficulties and so forth. And there must be a very wonderful reason why we're doing this as opposed to being the children.
Well, you get that chance too. And that's the most difficult thing to understand, because you're caught in time. Because you are playing according to the rules of the physical universe, there are certain limitations that have been attached to your consciousness and your awareness that make it difficult for you to think in multidimensional terms and to be aware, other than even vaguely intellectually, that this reality is plastic and that this reality is one among 1,000 infinities of realities, all equally valid and all equally purposeful, and that all human experience is your human experience. And that just as you are now in this consciousness experiencing the time of transformation and the difficulties that you are going through, so is it that you are experiencing the life that you now envy. And that awareness will come to you also. So you're not missing out on anything. You're not losing anything, nor are you being given a burden that others are not.
So you're saying eventually every dimension of consciousness will go through that?
Yes. Every dimension of consciousness is happening simultaneously outside of the stream of time. You Your awareness is that all of these things are happening, because your awareness in the wider reality is a collective awareness in which you are experiencing all permutations of the earth experience at once. It's a very difficult concept to follow, and I suppose you'll either have to take my word on it or not. But suffice it to say that you are experiencing in this awareness, in this consciousness, in this identity, a certain process of your ongoing eternal life, and that in other consciousnesses you are experiencing the rest. And in the wider reality where you are full and complete, and the being that is sending out all of these shoots of identity into all of these times and places, you are fully aware. And in another half twist of the reality, this now is the other now, and you are the child. And you are benefiting from what this you is suffering through.
Such a deal.
I have a 5-year-old child. Up to this point, people talk about.
Well, the advice that we have been giving, and that is to listen to and respond to your heart, to be the friend, the loving, guiding friend, to be infinitely flexible. Patience is a virtue that you are learning in your own process of transformation, that or you're going crazy. You are learning that not all things happen at the speed that you want them to happen. They happen at the speed that they must for you to assimilate them and grow properly, so that the timing is fulfilled. And so with the child, use the lesson of the experience of patience that you are learning in your life, and be as patient with that child as God is with you. Yes.
I was wondering if it's really a conscious choice to have that way, because, with my own children, I know it wasn't a conscious choice, and they came at a point in my life just they were supposed to happen.
Yes.
The
The consciousness of choice varies. The true choice is made at a higher conscious level. You may decide, let's say that you're married and everything looks positive, and you say, well, it's time to start a family. Well, one person may make that decision and be pregnant a month later. Another person may try for months and perhaps years before fruition is reached. Others not at all, and they may adopt to find the spirit that seeks them out. But the timing decision is made by the higher self. So the outer self may say, yes, I feel that it's time. If it isn't time, it won't happen until it is time.
Plautus?
Yes.
In my training as a social worker, I've been aware that teenage daughters and mothers have to go through a separation period emotionally. I know this happens also with fathers and sons. When you were mentioning in your earlier part of the lecture how close we are to these children and how they're our friends all the way along, I've experienced that with both of my children, and especially my daughter. And now that she's 14, we're still extremely close friends.
Yes.
And I'm fearful of this training that I had that
Yes.
says that we're going to have to become enemies for a while. And I was wondering if we don't, in fact, have to go through that.
No, you don't have to become enemies by any stretch of the imagination, and you believe those things at your peril, because you can certainly create those circumstances by your expectation. But nevertheless, in any relationship, there's a dance. And sometimes you're dancing cheek to cheek, and sometimes you're dancing at a distance. But the dance continues, and the connection with the partner continues. And in any relationship, there's a time of closeness. There's a time when space must be found. There is a rhythm in the flow of life and of ongoing maturity. And however New Age your orientation may be, and however loving you are in your work with your child, there nevertheless must come a time when the child does assert his or her own emerging sense of identity. Where there has been a gentle and accepting and patient, responsive, loving relationship, then the child doesn't have so far to go to establish that identity, because freedom and responsibility have been encouraged all along. Where there has been opposition, anger, authoritarianism, then often the space widens and becomes a gulf, sometimes a uncrossable gulf. But that is certainly not necessary, but allow the space to form when it needs to form, and don't fear that it will be an unbridgeable chasm.
A question, why so many teenagers and younger people are having children now years ago? Is there any reason for that?
Well, partly there's a rhythm in that too, and there's a change from generation to generation. Really, the practice has been in the last half century or more, 3/4 of a century perhaps, of keeping your children longer and longer. Due to societal demands, due to the fact that you're no longer an agrarian culture where children have an automatic place in the labor market. And when it was to the advantage of the family to hurry along the process of growing up, so that the children cease to become a burden and begin to become a financial economic help. Since the Industrial Revolution and coinciding with the changing of consciousness, there has been a tendency to extend childhood well into what would formerly have been considered adulthood. Also, with life expectancy increasing, there is more time to go through varying stages of life. With an increasingly complex world and an increasing ability to understand complexity, more time is required for education and for maturation than there was in the past. Now we are coming into another change and a very major change in human society and in human interplay. There is a need, in the first place, there is a spiritual, biological need that is being felt and responded to bring forth fruit in wholeness that will be a part of the new age. There is a polarity. There is the existent strength and power of a fear energy that has built over millennia, and there is the very new element of those imbued with love who have released the fear, and those who are being born into love and need not the fear. And so there is a tendency now for many to have children at a younger age out of that stimulus to bring the polarity into balance. Further, and we're not going to get deeply into this now, but there are events that are taking place on Earth and will be taking place more noticeably, deeply, and profoundly in the next few years that are also involved in this changing tendency. Yes?
What role does the child play in determining when it's going to be born?
Well, it plays an absolutely equal role with the parents, because it is a cooperative venture, and the timing is of equal importance to child and parents. In the parent's life, in the unfolding of the child's life, in the need for the child to be born under certain energy influences to imprint that which needs to be imprinted upon the personality.
Plautus, with us being the people that have been born into the duality and the children that are now in the New Age children, we have had so many lives where the closets have been in the sexual chakras.
Yes.
Now these New Age children, are they going to be freer in that area?
Freer, yes. Not free, but freer. Because you're still dealing with a transitional age. They're still going to be influenced by an age that is terrified of itself and of its secrets and of its sexuality. But that is going to be lessened because it does not find fertile ground in the whole children that are being born. And so while they may be affected in a surface way by societal mores that do not in fact apply or have any sensible application, they will not be affected at their core by this and will generally grow beyond that limitation. Now, the sexual understanding is going to be changing with all other understandings as the duality ends. There will no longer be a need for that burial ground of fear, and the area of the sexual nature will be more closely, increasingly attuned to reality, and that is the recognition that sexuality is a wheel, not an either-or proposition, and that what is sauce for the goose may not be sauce for the gander, and that there are individual needs that need to be responded to, and a society that needs to be more fluid and more oriented toward difference. And so less monolithic rules regarding what can or should be done and what can't or should not be done. Yes?
Plautus, why does it seem like we have so many young people that are into drugs and committing suicide and seem to be really mixed up? Is it because we don't notice that many New Age children?
Well,
I mean, it seems like it's much more than what it was.
Well, it has to do with the incredible stresses of the age of transition and the incredible growth of the fear energy. And it is a part of the polarity. We can't go into all the detail now because it's a very complex subject. But you are having children that are finding or looking for an opening to awareness that is denied to them by their family and by their society, that are choosing alternative means to try to find a means to scratch the itch that is within them, to expand the consciousness. Well, there are many ways to begin that process. Some of them can be very self-damaging. There are issues of fear and rebellion that are directly related to the polarization. There are going to be great rifts continuing and expanding in families, where there will be children born who are born to go through what you are going through, into freedom, into wholeness, born to families entirely captured by fear, by tradition, by the need to try to maintain the crumbling order of society. And so there are increasing stresses and strains upon a fabric that is itself being consumed and reloomed. So now we're going to draw this reading to a close, and we thank you all for your attention and bid you Godspeed as your journeys continue to open and to accelerate.
Thank you, Plautus.